Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Mr. Sydney Brownwood.
Good morning! Hello, and wherever you may be, or indeed are, this is the TooFatLardies Oddcast. We have no audience this week, that's why it's been a little bit quiet, no applause, because we're on a road trip, heading south from Lard Island, with the sat-nav set for the fine city of Southampton. And in the car with me are the veritable Thelma and Louise of wargaming, Richard Clark and Nick Skinner. Girls, welcome to the Oddcast.
Thank you, Sydney.
Hello, Sydney.
How are we doing?
We're on our way. We are Ron's 22, but there's only 3 of us.
We're the good 3 out of that squad.
That's right, yeah.
This time.
More than any other time.
We're going to find a way, are we, gentlemen?
We're going to find our way to Southampton for a fabulous event that is called, Nicholas?
Come and have a go if you think you are lard enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a fabulous name. Right, so, looking forward to a great day of gaming. The usual Lardy Games day setup where all people will be there in all shapes and forms, but most importantly, people who played Lardy Games before, people who've never played Lardy Games before, and even one gentleman who's never played a war game before. So I'm going to be having a chat with him and seeing how he gets on during the day. So it's going to be an absolutely fabulous event.
And the whole thing is organised by Mr. Mark Peachy's Backhouse, of course, from WSS magazine. So
the
it's
wargaming superstar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I've been chatting to Mark on Twitter, and I know he's very excited about it. We've seen a lot of photos of some of the games which we'll be seeing today, and there's a good spread of games as well. It's some Chain of Command, some Bag the Hun, some Sharp Practice. So a very good spread of games and different time periods. So it should be an absolutely fantastic day out, and quite a big gathering, around about 40 to 50 people, Mark was saying. So good size, really.
Which, when you consider this is the inaugural event, you know, Mark's not run one of these before. It's fabulous to see that the whole event was pretty much sold out within 24 hours, which is really good to see that people down on the south coast are keen to be getting involved with enjoying Lardy Games.
And a true sign of a wargaming celebrity like Peaches. You know,
Yeah.
you can draw a crowd like that. It's very, very impressive.
And we have some celebrity special guests, I believe, as well.
There's
not even we know about yet.
There's
possibly.
Henry Hyde is going to be there. He's one celebrity guest that we do know about. So looking forward to catching up with Henry, and looking forward to seeing who the celebrity guest is going to be.
Well, we'll find out later, maybe. But it's not the only Lard event happening this weekend, because I think we probably need to give a big shout out to the Sharp Practice event, which is happening in the Netherlands this weekend.
Yeah.
So, good friend of Lard, Eltjo Verweil, is running in Amsterdam this weekend. A whole range of games relating to the events of 1809 with British landing forces and a Prussian Freikorps and Franco-Westphalian force, to name but a few. So well done, Eltjo. That sounds like an excellent event, and good luck to all those taking part in the fantastic Dutch city of Amsterdam.
That'll be a great day out over there. I played in a game hosted by Eltjo at Poldercon this year, and I played in another game hosted by him in Poldercon about 4 years ago, and he's a guy who always produces some fabulous scenarios with some beautiful terrain to match. So it's I'm quite jealous of the guys going over there, but there's so much lard on the menu these days I can't eat it all. Although, Nicholas, you seem to look like you've been trying to.
Yeah, I certainly have been packing in the old lard this week. But wouldn't it be great, though, to be going to Amsterdam? Southampton is exotic, but Amsterdam is a step above.
It's spring again. I'll sing again. It's Sharp Practice in Amsterdam.
Oh, certainly a great...
We could write a song about that, guys.
We could have. It's a great city. It's an amazing city. But, you know, going to all these great places and playing war games with good friends and new friends, old friends. I mean, it's just a really great thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so although we're in the car, there's no... speed camera, Nicholas.
Camera
Although we're in the car, I don't think there's any reason why we can't discuss what we've been doing and what's in the workshop. So, chaps, while we're in the car, let's talk about what you've got in the workshop on the workbench at present.
Who do you want to start with?
I'm going to start with Nick.
Yeah, good idea.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. What have I got on the workbench? Well, I've been building more tanks. Always a sweet spot for me. But these
What a tanker.
Yeah, well, no, these ones are for chain of command.
Uh-huh.
And I've been building tanks with the idea of actually having them as terrain items rather than sort of game pieces.
And actually, there's a piece coming up on Lard Island News next week. That'll be showing what you've been doing there, because you've been doing some interesting conversion work.
I have. I was just about to tell you what I've been doing in terms of making some interesting conversion work.
Whoa.
So, in the Black Friday sale, if you remember that before Christmas, I picked up some Warlord Shermans, and with the idea that I'd make these as terrain pieces. So, did that and converted them with a bit of careful cutting so that they would be knocked out Shermans. My thinking on this was quite easy, really. Most of my tanks are actually 148th or 150th, but the prospect of picking up a bargain in the Black Friday sale said to me, you know what, I can make something sensible out of these tanks. So I have these two Shermans, which I'm making terrain items. The first one is on Lard Island News. What I've decided to do with it was make it so that it had been put out of action rather than completely brewed. So it has a thrown track, and there is I sculpted a dead crew member hanging out of the commander's cupola, and I'm really quite pleased with it. So you can see that on Lard Island News. What else is on my workbench? Well, we've been Discord Kriegspieling, which has taken up a lot of my time in planning for that, and I'm sure we'll can talk a bit more about that at some other point, because it's a new game. It's a different format to the one we've used before. We're using some new players to play via the app, and I'll tell you more about that at a later date.
So these terrain items, which are tanks, they're just going to be placed at different locations, almost like terrain items throughout the game. I remember, Rich, you did something similar with one of your World War I games, and there was a tank that you'd actually cut in half, so the tank could be half immersed in water and half. It looked really, really good.
That was an MDF tank from War Bases, which is a lot easier to saw in half than a resin tank.
Yeah.
And I used both ends of it to suggest partially submerged tanks at Passchendaele.
It's really effective.
Just a nice terrain piece. But Nick's, I think, is more for 30 core and our Arnhem project, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. So the idea is that these are exactly that. Shermans from 30 core. We're working on the Market Garden campaign, as you know. So these will be knocked out tanks used as terrain pieces in those games with paras on the Hells Highway.
Well, that sounds absolutely fantastic. And always looking forward to more about your Discord, but I know you can't say anything about it at the moment. In fact,
Peaches, let's just say peaches.
Again.
More peaches.
So moving on from terrain, Rich, what have you been up to?
Terrain.
More terrain.
More terrain. I'm getting ready for Salute, which of course is not far away now, and the game we're going to be running there is not the one actually on the calendar which says the Netherlands 1940. We've decided that we fancied doing something brand new, because I do like to take fresh games to shows, and the problem often is when you book an event like Salute, you're doing so months and months in advance, and so quite what you declare the game you're going to be doing is a little bit of a lottery. But we're actually going to be doing a game set in Malaya at the end of 1941. We got Japanese fighting. I'm not sure yet whether they're going to be up against the Argyll and Sutherlands or whether they're going to be up against the Australians. But anyway, what I've been building is a big rubber plantation, because I really like the idea of doing something. Often when you think of the Far East games, you think of jungle and more jungle, but of course it isn't like that. And in Malaya, the routes, the main roads, were the key issue that the British were attempting to defend, and the Japanese obviously then move around the flanks of them. But I'm quite keen to play a game where there's some interesting terrain. So I'm building a rubber plantation, I'm building all the ancillary buildings that go with that, a rail head so that the rubber can be transported away. We've got the district commissioner's bungalow with a tennis court, and really just going through putting together what I hope is, a really attractive table. So it's very much been terrain for me as well, but in a very different setting to the flat openness of the Netherlands. I've gone for Malaya.
It's always nice when the idea behind the terrain actually is coherent. So you've got your railhead, which takes away the rubber, and you've got something which looks realistic, not just as regards the physical terrain, but it all makes sense as regards putting something together.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what the lovely lady on the sat-nav has to say.
Telling us that Southampton is right and Amsterdam is left. Which way should we go?
Okay.
Well, today's going to be right, I'm afraid.
Let's roll the dice. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, the first thing I did when I started putting together my Malaya terrain was to build a huge bungalow, and then to build a load of, Malayan native properties, houses. And then I thought, well, actually, there's more to it than that. It was an incredibly sophisticated colonial arrangement there, a very, very peaceful colonial arrangement, and with thriving rubber plantations and mining areas. And I thought, well, I don't want to really build a mine because it's below the surface. So I thought the best thing to do is to build a big rubber plantation. But I think the narrative has to be there. So you've got the company offices, you've got the warehouse, you've got the station, you've got the railhead, you've got the big thing of water for the engines to take on, the steam engines to take on. But obviously you've also got some colonial buildings and some of the local native buildings. So I've tried to tell a bit of a story with the terrain. I enjoy the narrative side of all gaming, and I think telling that story with the terrain is as much part of that as anything else.
That sounds actually fantastic. Really well done. That's really good.
Yeah. But what about you, Sydney?
What have I been doing? Well, I finished a unit of Hussars, which I've been doing in 28mm for a while, and I've almost finished a similar. We're just turning down the sat nav there. I've almost finished a similar unit of Dragoons, again for the late 17th century. But I've also been doing some thinking and working in respect of the game that we talked about just after Christmas, which was a game based on reconnaissance.
Yeah.
So I've been reading around various books, and I've been doing some 2mm figures for that to combine with the 28mm figures, with the theme of reconnaissance, so like Hussars, Dragoons, smaller forces. So I'm going back to some of the 17th century manuals I've got, thinking about scouting, thinking about reconnaissance, thinking about how they were organised, with the idea of putting together the game that we promised we would.
Yeah.
Something relating to reconnoitring land, finding your opponent, and how you actually bring your opponent to battle. So that's been fun, and that's been something which, on the theme of people who are a bit time short, I've been doing a lot of reading on the train during the commute, and that's been a lot of fun actually. So working out how to do a game or a scenario with no preconceptions about the rules, just going back absolutely to the base and thinking, well, I'm not going to try and shoehorn it into anything. Obviously, in the rules that we've done and the scenarios that you've worked on, Rich and Nick, we've got lots of examples of great scenarios or great campaigns or mini games, but I really wanted to start from the basis of, well, what do we have as facts?
Yeah.
What did contemporaries think about? What did they write about? What have we actually got as facts? So I've been using about half a dozen British sources for that, and a couple of French sources as well, and there's some really interesting stuff which I've found out. So hopefully put all that together, and then got the 2mm forces which have been actually done. They took about a day really to paint the actual 2mm figures, and then the 28mm forces for the smaller actions on the table. So looking forward to finishing that off and putting that together over the next few weeks, really.
Sounds good. I think you're right. When designing any game, it's best not to have preconceived ideas, but to really start from a blank sheet of paper and then work up from what historical data you have and take it from there. So that's interesting actually, because one of the things that I've been dealing with is looking at scouting in Malaya, because in a jungle situation such things become really important. And I've been talking to Len Tracy down in Australia from the Australian Army Jungle Warfare School. They're talking about that and really trying to go back to basic principles to understand what the effect is and how it happened before trying to design rules for it. And Nick, I know you've been talking to me about recce missions in Holland associated with 30 Corps, with armoured cars, looking for alternative routes, searching out ways, checking out bridge weight restrictions and things like that, which is something often gamers don't think about at all. And of course that ties in with your reconnaissance jeeps, which I'm still looking forward to blowing up the first time they arrive on the table. But it's funny how all three of us are looking at reconnaissance afresh, if you like.
I think that's right. Before just moving on to Nick, and I think when you're thinking about war games and producing games which are easy to play and smaller actions, reconnaissance is a really obvious choice. And it's also something that I hadn't just realised, that once you start your tactical snippeting, which is a phrase that you used right back at the start of the Oddcast, it is surprising how much you can actually comb out of historical documents when you're just looking for something really specific. And reconnaissance is a great way of doing that. But anyway, Nick, 30 Corps, reconnaissance.
Just finishing off conversations that we've already had, really. So the Jeeps, I finished my airborne Jeeps. They look absolutely fantastic. Really excited to get the idea of getting them on the table. And of course, then how you use them on the table is the challenge, because they are quite, while they individually carry quite a punch as it's a Jeep with 5 guys and some Vickers sort of K machine gun on it. You think that's quite a nice little fun unit to play with. They're organised in sections of 2, so you've got two Jeeps in a section. You've got an officer in every other Jeep, so they're quite rich in leaders. You've got how many Jeeps in a section? I think it's 8 Jeeps in a section, and then you've got 8 Jeeps in a troop, and then you've got a number of troops making up the squadron. So I've got I've got a troop and a bit of Jeeps, enabling us to put a troop and a bit of Jeeps in action, funnily enough. But then, of course, most of the time the guys are fighting dismounted, so the Jeeps themselves become somewhat irrelevant potentially. So how you get that on the table in a way that allows them to show their recce status is challenging. And just looking at ways that we're able to do that, and ways that we can perhaps create games that allow us to explore that a bit more.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Very similar to dragoons and horses and horse holders, but more on that another time, because talking about tables makes me also think about benches.
Dinner?
No, not about dinner.
Breakfast?
Well, certainly about breakfast.
I haven't had breakfast.
No, not right.
I haven't had breakfast.
Breakfast.
Have you had breakfast, Sid?
Before, no, lads, gentlemen, girls, before we talk about breakfast, what we're going to talk about is benches, and in particular, the best bit on the bench.
I know, I've got the best bit on the bench.
Best bit on the breakfast bench.
I think it could be time for it to get some breakfast on the bench.
It will be soon.
The best bit on the bench, without doubt, this month, is from war bases. And they are bases, but they're their terrain bases. They do a range of terrain bases. Now, this might sound slightly daft, but what they are is more or less rectangles that you can put bits of terrain on. If you're doing a vegetable plot, or if you want to put let's say a fountain in a town square on a base, these are lovely because they are imperfect rectangles. Think of rectangles with slightly wavy edges, so that when you base your bit of terrain on it, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, so you can have big terrain features, you can have small terrain features, you can have whatever. When you put your bit of terrain on it and plonk it on the table, the fact that this base has got a slightly wavy edge means it blends in with the eye a lot better than if I just sawed up a piece of MDF and made a rectangle, a perfect rectangle. And they are so nicely put together and so nicely cut out. It's such a simple idea, but it really does enhance your table because they just blend in nicely. I'm not describing this very well, but Nick, you've seen them.
Yeah, I've got some, and they are excellent. So, for instance, one of the things that they're quite good for is things like If you're basing a horse and cart, or you've got a case on and you don't want it to have a regular square base, this has a kind of wavy edge, which is, sometimes you don't want a circle and sometimes you don't want a square, but you want something that's kind of a bit arty, and you'd love it, Sydney. It's that kind of artistic flair and shape that's kind on the eye.
I've used them myself when I was last year on the Flemish and Spanish. I used them for the from the painting challenge for the flight bases. So these were bases of troops which were in flight or shattered, so you replace your existing unit with a unit which is in flight or in retreat or rout, and they do look really nice, and they just add something just a little bit extra on the tabletop. Very, very nice indeed. That's a very good best bit on the bench, I think. That's absolutely a good choice.
On the breakfast bench.
No, best bit on the bench, at least for the moment.
I got mine in 3mm because I like they just have a little bit. You can get them in 2mm. I got mine in 3mm because they're just that little bit thicker, and you rather than trying to make the base blend in with the table precisely, it can stand up quite proud, and look like a beautiful. The base is a beautiful piece in its own right.
Yeah, the 3mm stuff.
Just think they're really lovely.
And War Bases, of course, once you go on their website, you'll find there's lots of other goodies on there as well. They've got lots of little clutter items. They do some fantastic wagons. A lot of my baggage carts, etc., that for chain of command and also for sharp practice are from War Bases. There's some cracking little items on there. So the train base is very good. Great for if you're doing little corners of crops, or if you've got a little field, little vegetable patch. Perfect for that.
Yeah, they are. And funnily enough, I went on their website when I got them, and there they had patrol. They had a patrol marker and jump-off point set with a Japanese flag on, and also with the sort of British RAF rondel type thing. So I picked some of them up while I was there. Just an incredible range of products that's growing and growing.
Every time I go on, there's something new on there.
Yeah, good stuff. Well done.
So good Martin. Stuff. So, moving on from the best bit on the bench, I think it's possibly time to think about some of the
breakfast.
I'll tell you what we're going to do, Sid. We're going to break for breakfast just to shut Mr. Greedy Guts up, and then we'll come back to the big issue.
Lunch.
And we're back. Well, that was an interesting breakfast. I think we can probably say that.
I'd say it was a great breakfast. Absolutely. What else can a man want in his bun? 4 sausages and a fried egg.
Mine was more interesting than excellent, I have to say. It was pretty motorway service area-esque.
It was very meaty. It was meaty. I think that's probably the thing you could all say.
Meaty. Well, I'd say functional.
Belly timber.
Oh my lord.
It will do.
Well, moving on swiftly from the breakfast, with no more to be said about that, we're moving on to our big issue of the morning. So here we are driving still towards Southampton, and we're going to be discussing the big issue which came in from Pat G in Ottawa. And it's possibly a little bit of a contentious issue, but that's what we like on the Oddcast. So here it is. Guys, how to get more people to try different types of Lard rules without looking like a dick. Pat writes, I've run into players who normally play bolt action or flames of war or other rules who've been turned off because they've found some members of the Lard community to be overzealous. Well, thanks a lot, Pat. That's a really good question, because that is a little bit contentious, but I like those kind of questions, and I think that we've got a few things to say about that. So before I say my bit, I'm going to turn that over to you two guys, Rich and Nick. What do you think about Pat's question? I think that's a pretty good one, actually.
I think it's a very, very valid point, and I think it potentially isn't just a point aimed towards the Lard community, but we've got to recognise the fact that people can be very, very tribal in the way they think and the way they behave, especially for some reason with sort of leisure activity things. think about, Manchester United fans are not going to go and watch Manchester City just because United are playing away that weekend. They support the team that they support, and often it seems that you get a bit of carry over there into the rule sets that people play and feel that they are, part of, if you like, because they're part of that community. It's funny, actually. It's ironic that we're on our way to a Lardy Games Day when this question has come in, because one of the reasons some of the first Lardy Games Days were played is that people were coming along on the forums, on the Yahoo group, and saying, look, we've got a real problem that when we bought Chain of Command, or we bought I Ain't Been Shot Mum, or we bought whatever set of Lardy rules, and we've taken it to our local club and said to our mates, hey, let's play this. And their mates have said, no, we don't want to play that because we're playing our favourite game, whatever that game may be. And so the setting up of the Lardy Games Day thing was to allow like-minded people to get together and extend the group of friends that they had further afield, and find people who wanted to play games that they wanted to play. So I definitely don't think that being a dick is something that is exclusive to people who play Lardy games. I think it's something that we potentially all have within us if we find ourselves really entranced with something that we're really, really enjoying, and somebody else comes along and says, hey lads, why don't we try something else? Imagine if you're halfway through a pint-sized campaign, for example, and somebody comes in and says, I think we should play Ludo this evening. You're going to say, nah, we're not interested. But I do think that there is a message for all of us that when it comes to just being decent, normal human beings, if one of your mates says, look, why don't we try something different, that we should be saying yes to that. You might be halfway through the pint-sized campaign, in which, say, quantify that and say, look, we're halfway through this campaign, we'll be finished in 3 or 4 weeks, let's give it a go then. So I do think that there is a real issue in any hobby environment where people feel that they've got their favourite game of the moment. I mean, you see it a lot recently with a lot of war games that have come along. People often say, are there too many war games rules being produced? Well, of course, the answer is no. You can never have too many war games rules, because it's always fun to try new rules, play new games, and it's always great to have the opportunity to go and choose something else if you fancy it. But a lot of war games you see pop up are incredibly popular for 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year, and then you don't see them again. But what's happening is, it's like, I always use the analogy, it's like a hit record. It's like a single that goes to number one in the charts and get played to death for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months maybe, but then is never really played again, just goes back in your record collection. Whereas and that very much represents some rules and the way they're being written. They're being written to have that popular appeal for an intense period of time, and then maybe get put back on the shelf while people move on to other things. Whereas the things I hope that we like to try and produce are albums, the rule sets that are more like albums, which you keep going back to and playing again and again and again over a longer period of time. So in a way, it's reflecting the way some rules are being developed to have that instant appeal. And I would say there's a lot of companies who manufacture figures, who develop a range of figures, develop a set of rules to go with it, and they're very, very keen to get an intense period of sales from that game, and then that's it. They've made their money, walk on to the next thing. And that's not a bad business model. It's the same with selling a pop record. That's what you want to do. But when you get people who are on the crest of a wave playing a game that they're really, really into, persuading them to do something else at that moment in time might be difficult to do. But we need to be reminded that in a social environment where you're dealing with other people and friends, that you should be more open-minded to their interests as well. Nick, what do you reckon, mate?
I think that if you don't want to be called a dick, don't be a dick. And if you see your friend being a dick, tell him or her that they're being a dick. It's really that simple, isn't it? It's about inclusivity.
Yeah.
It's about the way that we create a culture that drives behaviour. So the more we can promote a culture of openness in our games, the more we can include, as many people as we can from all branches of the gaming community and beyond, the more inclusive we can be, the more understanding we can be of each other. Most things that influence the way we behave are about fear. Sometimes we don't like things that we're not familiar with them, we don't understand them. So the closer we can get to them, the more we understand it, the less scared we are, the more we're willing to have a go. I think it's about being willing to have a go and not to take the piss out of other people because they're brave enough to have a go when perhaps you're not. So I admire people who play a broad range of games. I think playing a broad range of games is really good for your gaming health. And we've said it many times, Rich, and you bang on about it in your column often enough, it's a broad church. And I think we should embrace that. It's so if you see somebody being a dick, then say you're being a dick. Sort of see it, say it, sort it.
So there's some really good points there. I mean, I agree with everything both of you say, really. I think one thing about the whole idea of people who are very zealous for rules is that it kind of is a sort of problem which is very much sort of 2019, but when I go back like 15 years when we were starting out on the journey, there weren't any Lard rules, and we were still sort of keen, people were still keen to play whatever they were playing. And I think there's a difference between being overzealous because of a set of rules, because you want people to play that set of rules, and being just keen on an approach, a sort of an enthusiasm for the hobby. And I think if people get fixated on a set of rules, whatever that set of rules is, and they just want people to play that set of rules, it's probably not a great sort of place to always be. That's my own personal view. I don't really see that, honestly, amongst the people I've played with, and most of the time been playing TooFatLardies rules. But I do think that a really good point is that you enjoy the hobby and you're keen on the hobby. And obviously everyone we talk to in the hobby and it will be keen about their period or their game, and they'll want to talk about it, and that's absolutely brilliant, and nobody would want to stop that. I think to the point that you say, well, I want just to play these set of rules and you should play that set of rules, that for me is not really capturing the essence of what Lard is about, because to me, so the TooFatLardies approach isn't really only about the rules, and for me the rules are really a starting point. The thing which I think is really interesting is the community and the friendship that is created, but also going back 15 years and onwards, it's the ideas. It's the fact that you can take history and create ideas for games. So some of the games obviously we're well known for things like Chain of Command or Sharp Practice or Bag the Hun. Those are sets of rules that people can play. But a lot of the games that we've enjoyed at the club or with friends at other people's houses or taken around the shows have been games which have been based on ideas, wanting to do things which aren't in the existing rules or things we wanted to experiment with. And that creativity is, I think, something which is, for me, even more important than the rule sets we've actually produced, because that's the development of the next set of rules or the next set of ideas. And that's actually something which isn't just internal to us as individuals. That's actually something that is the community's product as much as anything else, because the ideas which are created into rules are just as much the product of being played by the friends that we have at the shows as by anything else.
Yeah, and you can play whatever games you want. You and I are consenting adults, Sydney. We can come together and we can play whatever game we want to. And if that means that we want to use a move mechanism out of Chain of Command and a firing mechanism from Bolt Action and an activation system from WRG, then you know what? We're allowed to do that, mate. And it's perfectly plausible to do that. I think the other interesting thing I'd like to say before I focus back on the driving, get my hands back on the wheel, is that... there's a reason we're going to Southampton today, and it's not to play the game. If I'm running a game of Bag the Hun, I don't have to drive 100 miles to play a game of Bag the Hun. I could do that in my own dining room if I wanted to. Why am I going to Southampton? Because it's part of being...
Your wife's not there.
Yeah. Because it's part of being a community, isn't it? Yeah. And it's part of growing that community and being part of that it brings people together. I'm playing with some guys today that I've never even met before. But you know what? I'm already excited about it.
Isn't that interesting? Because the whole ethos of Lard, and embodied very much in these games days, is the concept of inclusivity rather than exclusivity. The whole reason for starting them out was to allow people to come along and engage and play games that their mates were refusing to play with them, because they were busy with other systems. But more importantly, we've carried that on now 6-7 years later, or whatever it is, 7 years later since the first Lardy Games days. There's still that spirit of inclusivity that is really important. This is the first games day that we've ever had in Southampton, and we're going down there, and there are people there, as I mentioned earlier, who've never even played a war game before. And the whole plan is that we go down there and we help them and we get them involved, and we give them as much assistance as they want, or as little assistance as they want, because what we are as a collective group and as a cohort is inclusive. What you were saying about developing new rules ideas, Sydney, we encourage that from people in the Lard community, in the much wider Lard community, because we never set ourselves up as being Nick and Rich, the sort of godhead of Lard. We've always seen it as a collective effort where people are encouraged to work, to develop army lists, to share with other people. We're never there saying, oh, you can't put that army list out, this is copyright. We're saying, yes, let's create a body of knowledge that the whole can use, and together we can all make this something a lot bigger than what it could be if it was just Nick and I jealously guarding our intellectual property. That's couldn't be further from our mentality.
I think that's a really excellent point, and I think that also comes back to thinking about the rules and the games. So we talked about friendship, we talked about community, and those for me personally are the most interesting parts of the whole hobby, let alone anything to do with TooFatLardies. But also on rules and mechanics. I mean, we've played so many different games with people up and down the country, in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, and people have come from all different backgrounds. So we've had people who haven't been wargamers at all, people who've been board gamers, people who've been occasional wargamers, lots of role players, and in particular, people who are all of those. So they subset all of those things. People are wargamers, board gamers, role players, and perhaps they've given it up for a bit. So everyone comes with their own particular preferences, their own ideas about history, their own reading. So
we all start the journey from a slightly different location.
And it's not the case that you'd say, well, I wouldn't start it from here. It's wherever you start from, you're going to be welcome in any of our games. And to be honest, we've played as many games with TooFatLardies rules as we've played games without, and vice versa. It's not something that once you've written those rules, that's it, you've got to play with those rules. Any local variations are absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly one of the things that I'm always keen to do when other people are running games, I mean, I went over to the Netherlands for Poldercon this year, and if people decide that they want to, I'm playing in a game where the guy running it decides he wants to tweak things and change things, I'm never going to question that. Just let him do what he wants to do. It's his game. Once he's bought the set of rules, he can do what he likes to them and make the amendments he wants, or she wants. And getting back to that point of inclusivity, when we went down to Bristol on our way back from Penarth in January, it was fabulous to see that there were 3 lady wargamers there for that sharp practice event. And it's all about encouraging that inclusivity. It's very easy for youngsters going along to a club for the first time to feel that they are being not welcomed or even excluded. And I'm sure it must be the same for females going into an all-male environment in some clubs, although hopefully that is changing. The more clubs we go to around the country, we are seeing a lot more female wargamers, and I think that's a tremendously positive thing. But we need to think, when we are the potential gatekeeper, and people either turn up at a physical event like our local club, or a non-physical event like come onto the forum and say, hi, I want to be part of the group. We're talking to those people as though they are simply other wargamers who are going to enjoy doing what we enjoy doing, and not treating them as though they're some kind of inferior being because they've been playing a different rule set.
Yeah, and I would say that if you are in a club that plays exclusively any set of rules, a TooFatLardies rule set or another rule set. Just be brave enough to have those kind of conversations when you have a new person coming to your club.
Yeah.
What's it like for that person? What are you doing to welcome that person? We do get drawn into these cycles, these tribal behaviours when we come together as groups. And actually, sometimes when we look each other in the eye, we know that there's something else that needs to be done differently. And it's about being bold enough to take that step and say, you know what, actually, let's play something different this week. Let's think about doing something else. Because I'll tell you now, it will broaden your horizons, make you understand the games you're playing so much more better. You'll have great fun with new people in a different way. What's not to like about that, Sydney?
Well, I think that's exactly right. There's lots to like about that. And also, let's dispel any idea that we're just sitting there always playing TooFatLardies rules. I mean, we all play... No, we're not. No, we're not. I mean, I play as many different sets of rules for the period I really enjoy, and I've tried them all out at some point or another.
Sure, yeah.
And as I mentioned on another podcast in a different place, those rules are always really interesting. They're always part of the journey. And if you want a certain type of game, and sometimes I wouldn't play TooFatLardies rules. I'd play something which is themed slightly differently. I'd always go back to the TooFatLardies rules because I really enjoyed them. But that doesn't mean that just because I like strawberry jam, I can't enjoy Marmite or something else on my toast in the morning.
Do you like Nutella?
I'm not a keen fan of Nutella, I must say.
I'm a bit worried about
I find
the
it
palm
disgusting.
oil issue.
Yeah, it's really horrible.
Peanut butter?
I don't like peanut butter. I do like peanuts, but not peanut butter. I like marmalade.
Thick cut?
Thick cut, preferably. Yeah, that's one of my favourites.
That's
Old English.
Have we had breakfast?
We have had breakfast.
We could have another. I think that an important point here, because I think what we've said is all very good, but we need to focus on the being a dick bit.
Yeah.
Because let's not pretend that people who like TooFatLardies cannot behave like dicks. We're not all saints all the time. But the important thing to think about is if you want your mate to try something different to what he's doing now, you don't tell him what he's doing is complete bollocks. If you walk in a shoe shop and that man is trying to sell you a new pair of shoes, he should be saying, I like the shoes you've got on, sir. How about these? They're slightly different, but they look like they're your style. What he shouldn't say is, your shoes are shit. Why don't you get some of these? They're much better. So, think about this when you're talking to other people about the games that they're playing. Respect the fact that they might enjoy playing a different type of game. One of the things that comes across on certain online war game sites is the only way to play a war game is the way that I'm playing it. You get these people who, when they're asked the question, do you want a game or do you want a simulation? And they say, no war game can ever be a simulation. It's totally impossible. The only way to play a game is like this. And what they're saying is, I don't want a simulation, I want to play my game like this. However, what they're so often failing to do is appreciating that other people might want to take a different stance. And we have to appreciate that as well and try and say to people, not you're wrong, but say to people, why don't we try a bit of different stuff that might be interesting, complementary to what you're doing.
Well, war games, like history, they're non-binary activities, aren't they? They're complex things.
Yeah.
There's no single truth in history. There are facts which you then want to apply, and wargamers, we like facts, but we're more interested in the why and the how. And gaming's like that. There's no one single game which is the best game in the world. You have different games and different preferences at different times.
Change your lens. A different game enables you to change your lens and see things in a different way.
Yeah.
And it might be that it enables you to throw light on a different way to how the history unfolded, or it might be that it throw light on a different way to have a mechanism working in the game. Either way, it's going to be a refreshing new view.
Or just fun.
And one of the interesting things is when you play different games is you go back to the games you're playing before and you think, well, actually, the game I was playing before, that might be evolved or changed in some way, which would be interesting. Now, the game you're playing first might be a TooFatLardies game, and the game you're playing afterwards may be a game by a different company, or a game you've made up yourself. The point is that once you realise that, there isn't really an end point. There is no rules. There are rules starting points. There are things which are written down and published by companies, but there is no end rule. So being a dick because you want to get people to do something isn't really the approach which I would always take.
No, I agree with you, Sid. Absolutely, totally agree with you. One of the things I was going to add there, but I hesitate on the basis that it's important that we sort out the dick issue. But I just wanted to mention the idea about rules and creating games. The only way you get new sets of rules is through dissatisfaction with existing sets. So if you're playing a set that is not quite the game that you want, you change it, you recreate it, you create something new. And the more new things we can create in a hobby, the better. So actually, it's perfectly reasonable that people will challenge and discuss and merge rule sets together into new ideas, and that's the lifeblood of the future of rules and games design. So yes, Richard.
Oh, absolutely. You were reminding me there of when we produced our first set of rules, I Ain't Been Shot Mum, and some of the comments, because at the time, the very idea of introducing friction into a game, for some people, I might as well have beheaded the Pope and the Queen in the same action, because it was such an abhorrent thing that we were presenting. But the concept of friction in games now is entirely normal. I mean, if you look at Black Powder, for example, where you roll your dice to see whether you can, activate troops in your command, you then roll to see how far they move. That incorporates some of the concepts of friction that we introduced nearly 20 years ago, which at the time people were almost, coming around with pitchforks and burning sort of braziers to burn the house down type of thing. Whereas without people daring to be different, the hobby would simply remain in one place and would sit there and become bland and boring. I think whoever's doing it, we need people to try and apply original thought.
And once you've found a game you like, there's no reason why you shouldn't stick with that, I guess. But out of common decency to others, if somebody suggests playing another game, what have you got to lose? Give it a go. Yeah,
don't be a dick, in other words. Just open-minded, and politeness. It's the way. It's if you always go to the same pub 7 days a week, and your mate comes in and says, "Let's not go to the Rose and Crown tonight. Let's go to the Flying Horse," then why not go to the Flying Horse if that's what he fancies? It's just called being considerate of other people.
And you may even like the decorations in the Flying Horse more than...
it's a shit up.
Well, I think that...
Well, if you go to the Flying Horse and you find out it is a shithole, you can go back to your regular, can't you?
Yeah, the Rovers.
At least you're giving it a go.
Well, Pat, I hope that first of all, I hope that's made sense, and secondly, thanks ever so much for that question. It was a little controversial. We thought about it carefully beforehand, but Pat, really thank you so much for sending in that question. That really got us thinking.
I didn't think about it at all.
And that was
the answer.
Thank you, Richard. That was talk to Pat. Pat, that was a great question,
Pat.
and thank you very much. So moving on from there, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back to talk about the actual show itself.
We're going to be there.
We're going to be there
we are,
very shortly, in fact.
16 mins, it said.
16 mins.
So we'll catch
11 me's.
So we'll catch you in a few moments.
Right, well, here we are at Come On Down If You Think You're Lard Enough. And we've just finished the first game, and I'm joined by two guys who've been playing Mud and Blood on the First World War, 1914. Matt Slade of Glenbrook Games, who is a veteran of many Lardy Games days. You have to wonder about his sanity, that he keeps coming. And Mikey, this is your first Lardy Games day, but more importantly, that was just your first war game, is that right?
Ever, yeah, first war game ever, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Did you? Can I ask you, what made you think, because you're not 8 years old, what made you think, I'm going to play my first war game ever at the age of 97? How old are you, Mikey?
I'm 28.
28. So what
and-
made you think at 28 and 3/4, first war game ever?
Well, I was watching Sharp
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then you popped up. And after that, I thought that looks like a really good rule set. Really good fun.
Yeah. So
and
you
have a
come
few
and play
beers.
something else.
Yeah. So I was forced into it.
Yeah.
So I thought you get a few beers playing that. I
Yeah.
wanted to learn it.
Right.
And my
Okay.
brother played it as well with me. So
Right.
my
Yeah,
twin,
it's good to have a ready-made opponent in the shape of a brother, isn't it?
Well, twin brother. So
Yeah.
he's,
Oh, even better. So it's equal. Points value is equal
it is very
sides.
equal. And
Right.
it's Michael and Alan as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
you're already getting into the whole celeb status thing. And Matt, how did he get on? You can be honest. Was he crap?
No, he did very well. Very well.
Thank you.
It was the first time I played Mud and Blood for a very long time myself, actually.
Yeah.
And it was really good to play it again. It was a 1914 base game, so no nasty trenches.
Right.
We had to defend a canal against the nasty Germans.
Right. That was a nasty German alarm going off, and it's just stopped because you've beaten them, obviously.
Exactly. Trying to chip in as usual.
Right.
But no, we did very well. We had some good runs on the cards.
Right.
But we were able to sort of take them apart.
So roll a lot of sixes on the second phase, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
you've done really well on the sixes.
Yeah, but the cards favoured us.
Bit like Las Vegas.
Very much so. Cracking game, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, so
Really,
we were
really
able to sort of
enjoyed
take them apart, sort of piecemeal,
Right.
and I saw them off.
Can I ask you, because one of the things we're talking about in the Oddcast this week is about inclusivity and how difficult it is to come into the hobby for the first time. You know, you can imagine going along to a War Games club for the first time, and there's dozens of people there who have all known each other for 20 years, which can be a little bit potentially intimidating. How have you found it coming along here today, not knowing anybody other than seeing my ugly mug on YouTube and discovering that I'm much better looking in real life? But other than that, how has it been coming along for the first time?
It's been, I was very nervous. So I put it on Twitter. I was quite nervous.
Yeah.
I had good response from the guys.
Yeah.
And yourself as well. Good response there.
Yeah.
But come along, brilliant.
Yeah.
My friends got me a lot of stick for wargaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't quite understand what it's about.
So does my wife.
Yeah. it happens big time with
Yeah.
my girlfriend. We've
Yeah.
got enough miniatures, you don't need any more. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming down today has been a real eye-opener. I really want to get into the gaming side of things now.
Brilliant. That's good to hear, because I think one of the important things about the culture that we're trying to develop is the fact that you're not coming down for a competitive experience where you're desperately trying to beat your opponent, but it's about enjoying the game and enjoying a social experience as well. So that's brilliant to hear. Well done, guys. Shake hands with you guys. Congratulations.
Thank you, Richard.
on
Thank you.
winning your game and your first game.
Yeah.
What are you lined up to play this afternoon?
I'm with Colin, Bosching Wars.
Oh, Bosching Wars. I've just been taking some photographs of that.
Yeah.
Nobody on the planet, apart from Colin, has ever heard of the Bosching Wars, but I tell you what, it looks really good. And there's a chance to play sharp practice.
Yes,
so
Sharp Practice
that'll be
is,
the one.
the one I first watched
That's
you
the
on.
one. Good. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks for talking to me, guys, and let's hope the day continues as well as the morning has done. A few beers tonight lined up, Matt?
Oh, I think so.
Good, me too. Right, brilliant. We'll look forward to that, especially. Thanks.
So I'm here with Charlie, who we just played a fantastic game of sharp practice with. Charlie, how was that game for you?
Oh, thoroughly enjoyable. Had a great time and managed to sneak the win just towards the end.
Snuck the win against me and Andy as the Japanese players, but it was a great game on Colin's terrain and figures, which looked fantastic, which you can see on Twitter. But it's not been your first time at a Lardy Games Day, has it? I mean, I remember seeing you in Antwerp, but, there's been other events that you've gone to which are lard related.
Yes, they have indeed. I've been a regular at Deep Fried Lard in Scotland for the last 4 or 5 years, and I also last year for the first time attended Ebo Lard in Yorkshire, and have had lots of other Lardy games at various different places.
Yeah, so both of those are fantastic events. I mean, I'm hoping to get up to Edinburgh myself to do Deep Fried Lard this year. But what brings you back to Lard Games? I mean, there's what is the thing that makes you think, I should really do that year after year?
Well, I love the games and the gaming, but I think it's bigger than that. It's the whole community that surrounds it. I was I mean, I started out, I was wandering around the show in Edinburgh, the Claymore show, and which was my one wargaming event of the year, going back sort of 5 years, and Derek Hodge kindly asked me along to Deep Fried Lard, and I went there, and that was a revelation for me.
And you made that terrible mistake of listening to anything Derek said, and even the worse mistake of following it.
And I've continued to
I mean,
do
I've
so,
never done that.
No, I would always do what Derek said. It's much bigger than me.
Derek is a terrifying figure when he's roused. I understand that, Charlie. So it's really the community as much as, well, obviously as much as any of the games. It's playing games with people you like, I think, probably first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the spirit in which the games are played, which is very much not necessarily to gloat over one's win, as what I have just done, but is to enjoy the process of the game, rather more than just gunning all out for the result, but also the crack, if you like, the banter that goes with it, and the sort of social occasion that they've become.
It's fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Charlie. What are you going to be playing this afternoon?
This afternoon, for the first time ever, I am playing Through the Mud and Blood,
Yeah.
World War One. So
You'll have a lot of fun there.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Very
really
good.
Looking forward to it.
Right, well, that's been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us on the Oddcast.
Thank you.
Right, well, here I am, and I'm talking to Richard and Adrian. Hello, guys.
Hello,
You've been running a game here this morning.
Have indeed, yep.
And
The
tell us about that.
Cape Frontier War.
Right.
And we've been running a game set in 1851, a kind of our own little adaptation of the Boomer Pass incident at Christmas time in 1851, with the British column being attacked by ambushed by a load of Corsa who aren't very happy that they're on their land.
Right. And how did it go? How did it go for the British, Adrian?
Well, didn't start particularly well with the skirmisher leader on his first action spraining his ankle,
Right.
only to then be followed up by one of the captains of the 6th Foot being knocked over by his men.
Right.
And it kind of developed from there, really. So the Corsa primarily got a lot of early moves, and a lot of cards and activations went to the Corsa, as was the turn of things. So they managed to move up swiftly, cause a lot of early damage, and sort of pin the British in place, so they weren't really able to manoeuvre much. The British started coming back in that they managed to get their 2 units on and in formation, started pushing the Corsa back a bit, causing a little bit of worry, but the Corsa seemed to have rallied quite a bit and seemed to be keeping the British at bay.
And they came back and won the day, did they?
Yep, it certainly seems so, with a lot of the Cape Mounted Rifles were utterly annihilated in several rounds of combat with some very pointy spears.
Right.
And the skirmishers have also been seen off, but it's just 2 regiments of foot trying to basically hold the line and protect 2 wagons, which have managed to only get on the board.
Right. Okay. So the local boys done good would be the football analogy.
That would be very much the football analogy. Local boys done good, and the British, hopefully they may live yet to fight another day, but at the moment it's not looking too good for them.
So they're just going to be after a rematch then, in the hope of.
We're going to do that this afternoon. We're going to change a couple of things and
Right.
hopefully make it a little bit more advantageous for the British. But generally, really good game, and everybody loved it. So.
Right, great. One of the things that I really enjoy about playing Sharp Practice is that you get a narrative and a storyline to it. You guys seem to be getting through that with the British turning up on the table, twisting their ankles, being barged over by their men in the close sort of bush terrain of.
Exactly
Are we on the high veldt in this game, or we're in the Cape Province, aren't we? So
we
not
are.
on the high veldt,
We're up in the Kloofs.
are we? Right.
We're in the Kloofs, marching between 2 towns. It's based on the Boomer Pass incident, which happened between the town of Fort White and Uniondale, and in between there is some pretty horrible jungle territory that the Corsa call home, and that the British really don't like fighting in, to be perfectly honest, and they use it to every advantage.
Right, great. Okay, now this is your first Lardy Games Day you've been
It is,
to.
yeah.
And how's it going? The reason I asked that, one of the things that we were talking about as a big issue on this podcast is the importance of inclusivity, the importance of being able to invite people along to Games Days and trying to make them feel at home. Do you feel there's been a positive atmosphere today?
Utterly brilliant. Yeah, the guys just seems like we've known them for ages. First time we've met them, but really good guys. Great spirit. No sort of nobody's been too competitive. It's just a great laugh, and everybody's enjoyed it, including the British players who have been, let's face it, pasted, and they've really enjoyed it, and
taking it well.
Taking it well.
So if you can get your bottom handed to you on a plate and still enjoy yourself,
then it's a successful day.
It's a sign of a good game.
A good game. Brilliant game. Yeah, it's been. I think that's the beauty of sharp practice in itself, is the fact that although it is a decent, serious, obviously very good battle simulation, at the same time it's got a bit of funniness to it, a bit of comedy, a little bit of it's got a bit for everybody, and you can make light of the situation, which is what it's all about.
Good, brilliant. Okay, lads, well, thanks very much for coming along, and I hope this won't be your last Lardy Games.
No, absolutely not. Now we've got some other ideas for some other big games, so hopefully some different periods, and we'll be back with something new and exciting.
Brilliant. Well, great. Right, chaps.
Yes.
Who have we got here? We got Nigel and Adam. Right, great. Good to see you. How far have you guys travelled to come here today?
Isle of Wight.
Isle of Wight? Did you swim or?
On his back.
And don't tell me you walked.
We're still working on the fixed link.
Good. Well, we won't ask what's brown and steaming and comes out of cows or something like that. That's an old joke about the Isle of Wight ferry.
Absolutely.
But, so you were playing Bagdaham there?
Yes, indeed.
Did you? Is it your first time you played Bagdaham?
Yes, first time. Yeah.
Right, and how did it go for you, darling?
Well, my personal pilot, he got shot in the back of the head.
Right.
Plus with a pistol round, we think. As the German ace didn't actually lose any ammo.
Right, okay.
My Sprog pilot actually survived by bailing out.
Right.
Well, no, I didn't really. My plane disintegrated around me, and I just sort of went
pop, yeah,
pop, and fell into the sea. So yes,
right, great.
Marvellous.
And you?
Well, Bomber Command came in. We sunk a destroyer.
You were the
German Bomber Command. The Luftwaffe.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, and we sunk a destroyer. We took out a large freighter, and everybody made it home.
I've taken out a few large freighters in my time, but
and all he did was a little bit of damage to my instrument.
Right. Well, as long as it gets better and still works later, that's all that matters. Right, brilliant. Well, it sounds like you had fun for the first time.
Epic.
Yeah,
it really was great.
That's great, and a beautiful looking game. I mean, what a match that was.
It's fantastic.
It brings the whole thing to life, doesn't it? And I always like it when you're playing an aerial game where you've got other aspects on the table. So your fighters are trying to get to your bombers, and your bombers are trying to get to the ships.
Absolutely.
And
nice
then
scenario.
You've got German top cover, which are trying to get to him.
Without the ships, we would have just ended up piling straight towards, and it would have been a dogfight, and it would have been a fun game.
So it's a punch up in a pub car park, really, isn't it? Rather
but the fact,
than something
you're right,
tactical.
with different objectives, really.
Yeah.
Made it a great game.
We approached it differently, didn't we?
Well, there was a little
by
bit
losing.
Yeah. Quite a lot of innuendo along the way.
Good. Well, right, I don't get involved with innuendo personally, but right, good. So, is it your first Lardy Games day? Have you been to it?
Yes, it's the first
Yeah,
one.
Right,
first one,
and how did you find? One of the things that we were talking about coming down in the car is the importance of trying to make events like this welcoming, so people can come along. Because obviously, I don't know whether you've met any of these guys before or first time.
Well, yes, I've met you before.
Right. Well, that helps because you go to the same club. But But how did you find coming along for the first time at an event?
Fantastic.
Yes, great.
It was really welcoming, and say kudos to Mark. I mean, it's
great gig, wasn't
Everyone's
it?
got
A
the
lot
right-
of credit to Mark.
Yeah, everyone's got the right ethos.
Yeah. I think that's all part of the culture that we're trying to get across.
Hideously lost both games today and had immense fun doing it.
Well,
absolutely.
That's no more can be said. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to talk
very much
to you.
appreciated.
Thanks.
So that was come and have a go if you think you're large enough. And I think what those interviews sort of say is that what we were saying on the way down in the car was very much borne out by people's experience. We had people who were veterans, we had people who that was their first Games day, and we had people who one guy who was his first game, and they all seemed to come away with a good impression of the hobby and a good fun day in a great community. So that was what really struck out for me from all of those interviews. Rich, Nick, was that your view as well?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it was a fabulous day, and all credit has to go to Mark Peach's Backhouse for his hard work in organising the day. I think it's really interesting to see the different styles of people who run the Lardy Games days. At one extreme you get people who count every sheet of toilet paper. At the other extent, it's just a case of turning up. Everybody just turns up with very little prior organisation. But ultimately, what happens is that people just really get on with it and have a good time. And I think that's a testimony to wargamers in general. And yesterday was no different. It was a really, really nice day. Followed by a great evening, a very social evening, having a chat, just generally chewing the fat about the hobby. Nick?
It was a good day for sure, yeah. I mean, I ran Bag the Hun 2 games through the day, so I didn't get to see some of the other games were there, but I think I probably spoke to most of the people that were in the room at least at some point, so even though we were there at our tables playing our own individual games, there's plenty of space for people to mix and to chat and to enjoy some donuts, and we were very well looked after. So I would echo what you said there. Well done to Peaches for organising a cracking day, and I'm sure it will be set in the calendar next year.
Well, certainly hope so, and my thanks as well to Mark and everyone who turned up. And it was one of the things I really enjoyed was meeting people who you'd seen on Twitter and on forums, and actually meeting those people. That was a huge, huge pleasure. So I really enjoyed that very much. So on the theme of Lard events, Exeter War Games Club will be running Clotted Lard on the 14th of September. That's the second year running. We're going to be there with another really good day of gaming down in Exeter. The first event was in 2018 with about 50 gamers enjoying a whole range of games. So spaces are available, but for that one, book early so as not to be disappointed. You both had a great time in Exeter, didn't you guys? Remember?
Yeah, I enjoyed it so much I broke my ribs.
And maybe a repeat of that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And talking of great time, don't forget we got Deep Fried Lard in Edinburgh on the 6th of July. That's in Musselburgh, just outside Edinburgh. There's still a few spaces available there, so get in touch or check out the forum for details of that and contacts.
And then David Hunter, that dervish of all things sharp practice, is running 2 events on our calendar for 2019. First of all, a Peninsular War themed event in Manchester in August at BritCon called Quelle Affaire. That's on the weekend of the 9th of August at the British Historical Game Society event at the University of Manchester. And Sharp Practice is regularly one of the biggest events at BHGS, so why not join him, David, and the rest of the crew in there for that.
Yeah, and of course, not forgetting, David is also running a French Indian War weekend in Bristol on the weekend of the 12th to 13th of October at Bristol Independent Gamers, which is a great venue. That's called Where the Leaf Falls, and a big, as they call it, is a fabulous venue with its own shop and great gaming facilities, and run by a smashing team of people down there, so you'll be sure to get a warm welcome there.
Well, fantastic. So that probably wraps it up for this edition of the Oddcast.
Well, I think probably we should say that we will be, of course, at Salute in a couple of weeks' time, and you can find us somewhere in the big hall. I think as you walk in the door, if you head for sort of 11 o'clock on the clock face, if you head over to your front left, you will find us eventually over in that corner somewhere.
If you look at the floor plan, I think we're kind of top left, as we usually say, at the back by the bins.
So, join us by the bins.
To play some Chain of Command.
Have a
go, come along, because we'll be playing participation game using Malaya. So come along and have a dabble with us.
Fantastic. So, from all three of us, we'll see you there.
Good night.
Good night, gentlemen.
It's
ladies.
Morning. It's morning.
Can we have breakfast now?
Oh, not again. Oh. In tonight's show, Sydney Roundwood was joined by Nick Skinner and Richard Clark, with music by Roger Barraclough and his band.